Welcome to snow hissed against the funicular's windows as it climbed the last vertiginous pitch toward the Grand Hôtel des Glaces. The cable car swayed like a pendulum, iron groaning in the gale. Hercule Poirot sat alone in the rear compartment, gloved hands folded over the silver head of his cane, green eyes fixed on the white abyss below. Chapter 1. The Ice Palace. Favre's laugh cracked like ice. She welcomes no one this week. Record storm telegraphed down. Funicular may be the last link to the world. They crossed a bridge of packed snow, boots crunching. The hotel loomed, 7 stories of white stone and black iron, balconies jutting like broken wings. Every window blazed gold against the night, yet the building seemed to inhale the storm rather than resist it. Inside, the atrium was a cathedral of glass and frost. Chandeliers, actual chandeliers, hung, encrusted with icicles that dripped into silver buckets below. A string quartet sawed valiantly at a Strauss waltz, though the cellist's bow kept slipping on frozen rosin. Poirot paused on the threshold, letting warmth seep into his bones. The air smelled of pine, beeswax, and something sharper ozone. Favre led him past a marble desk where the concierge, a cadaverous man named Lucien, bowed with mechanical precision. Suite 12, as requested. The scene is on the East Terrace. Preserved, exactly. Preserved, Poirot repeated softly. A curious choice of word, mon ami. They ascended in a cage elevator operated by a boy of perhaps 17, pale, mute, eyes wide as saucers. The porter, Poirot would learn, Hans. On the 3rd floor, corridors branched like arteries. Tapestries of medieval hunts hung stiff with rime. Gas sconces hissed blue flames. Favre spoke in a low rush. Victim. Victor Stahl, Austrian industrialist, 42. Arrived 3 days ago with a party of 5. Planned a winter retreat to finalize patents. Found at 0617 by Hans. No struggle, no blood, just cold. The terrace doors stood ajar. Wind screamed through the gap, whipping snow into spirals. Poirot stepped outside. The body lay center stage on a carpet of untouched white. Victor Stahl wore evening dress white tie, patent shoes now dulled by frost. His arms were spread cruciform, gloved hands open to the storm. Between the fingers of the right, a single red rose, petals velvet against the snow, stem thornless. Poirot knelt. The drift around the corpse was virginal depression where a body might have fallen, no scuff of approach or retreat. He touched the rose. The bloom was warm. Impossible, Favre breathed. Poirot's monocle flashed as he examined the face. Stahl's eyes were open, pupils pinpricks, lashes starred with melting flakes. The skin, too pale, almost translucent, showed no lividity, no blanching from pressure. With a silk handkerchief, Poirot pressed the corpse's cheek. It dented, then slowly rebounded like chilled wax. Rigor absent, he murmured, yet the cold, unnatural. He produced a pocket thermometer. Mercury plunged to 34 degrees. The terrace itself registered 21 degrees. Favre shivered. The doors were locked from inside, bolt thrown, key on the inner side, no ladder, no wings, no sense. Poirot stood, brushing snow from his knees. Then we begin with who benefits from this theatrical tableau. They returned indoors. Heat enveloped them like a drug. In the manager's office, a mahogany cave lined with ledgers, Favre spread documents. Stahl's party, 5 guests plus staff, all snowbound. No departures since the storm hit. Poirot tapped the page. And the staff? Skeleton crew, chef, 2 maids, Lucien, all accounted for in the kitchen at 06 Audiobook. Poirot's gaze drifted to a framed photograph on the wall. The hotel in 1894 when it was a tuberculosis sanatorium. Children in wheelchairs on this very terrace. Faces blurred by long exposure. He turned to Favre. Show me the rose. In the office safe lay the bloom wrapped in gauze. Poirot lifted it to the lamp. Damascus attarrar, and beneath, formaldehyde? No, something metallic. He scraped a petal with a penknife. A crystalline residue glittered. Favre leaned closer. Dry ice? Perhaps, but dry ice sublimes. This clings. Poirot pocketed the sample. Now the terrace again, I must see. Back outside, night had deepened to indigo, the storm redoubled, snow now horizontal. Poirot circled the body like a raven, measuring angles with his cane. The terrace overlooked a sheer drop 200 meters to the glacier. No ledge, no purchase. He examined the doors. Heavy oak, iron bolt. The key hung on a hook inside. No duplicate noted. Poirot knelt again, brushing snow from the balustrade. A faint scratch 3 parallel lines, as if claws had raked the stone. Curious, he whispered. Hans appeared in the doorway, gesturing frantically. Poirot followed him inside. They descended to the service corridor, a warren of pipes and shadows. Hans pointed to a dumbwaiter shaft, barely wide enough for a child. Poirot opened the hatch. Inside, a single red petal, fresh. Upstairs in the atrium, the quartet had ceased. Guests gathered by the fire, faces pale as the snow outside. Lady Beatrice stood apart, clad in emerald velvet, a diamond clip shaped like a rose at her throat. She met Poirot's gaze with defiance. "You are the detective," she said, voice cut glass. "Find who did this abomination." Poirot bowed. "I shall, madam, but first tell me of your quarrel with Monsieur Stahl." Her chin lifted. "We argued. He wished an heir. I cannot provide one, but I loved him, and I was in the library until 4 reading Madame Bovary. Ask anyone." Dr. Voss approached, bag in hand. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Victor suffered nightmares. I prescribed laudanum. He refused." Poirot noted the tremor in the doctor's fingers. "And this?" He indicated the bag. Voss opened it. Vials, morphine, digitalis, and liquid. Nitrogen, experimental. "For cryotherapy," Voss said quickly. "Old war wounds." Klaus Ritter stormed over, brandy sloshing. "This is madness. Victor held the patent that would save my factories. Now it dies with him." Madame Duval swept in, veils fluttering. "The spirits are angry. They demand justice." Poirot raised a hand. "Enough. Tomorrow we reconstruct the night. Tonight." A scream shattered the air. Lady Beatrice stood at the foot of the grand staircase, staring upward. On her bedroom door, visible to all, a single red rose pinned by a dagger through the stem. The blade still quivered. Chapter 2. The rose at midnight. Poirot ascended the grand staircase with the measured tread of a priest approaching the altar. The dagger-pinned rose still quivered in Lady Beatrice's door, its crimson petals trembling as though alive. The blade itself was a curiosity, a slender stiletto of surgical steel. Handle wrapped in black silk, warm to the touch, as if recently gripped by a fevered hand. Inspector Favre puffed behind him, lantern swinging. "The corridor was empty not 5 minutes ago, I swear it." Poirot's reply was soft. "Then our killer moves like the wind itself, mon ami, or—" He plucked the rose free, dagger and all. "He was invited." The bloom exhaled a perfume both cloying and metallic. Poirot brought it to his nose, eyes narrowing. Beneath the attar of Damascus lingered the ghost of something sharper. Ammonia? No. Ether. He wrapped the flower in his silk pocket square and turned the handle of Lady Beatrice's suite. The room beyond was a confection of rose damask and gilt. A fire crackled in the grate, yet the air held a chill that owed nothing to the storm. The bed was turned down, pillows plumped. A half-read copy of Madame Bovary opened to a page marked by Poirot's mustaches, twitcheda pressed violet. Lady Beatrice stood at the window, arms wrapped about herself. Snow lashed the panes like thrown gravel. You are undisturbed, madame, Poirot inquired. She whirled, emerald eyes flashing. Undisturbed? A corpse lies on the terrace, and now this threat at my door. Poirot laid the dagger on the escritoire. Tell me of the library. You were there until 4? Until past, actually. Hans brought cocoa at 3. I read by the fire. Ask him. Poirot's gaze drifted to the hearth. Ashes glowed, but the poker bent. He lifted it with a handkerchief. The tip was blackened, as if used to stir something hotter than wood. Favre cleared his throat. The library fire was banked at midnight by the maid. No one entered after. Poirot replaced the poker. Yet someone did, and they left a signature. He crossed to the wardrobe, opened it. Gowns hung in regimented splendor silk, velvet one of sable. Beneath the hem of the sable, a single red petal, wet. Lady Beatrice paled. That coat was locked in my trunk. I have the only key. Poirot examined the trunk, solid oak, brass lock unscratched. Yet when he lifted the lid, the scent of roses poured out like incense. Inside, nestled among furs, a second dagger, identical to the first, blade crusted with something dark. Favre swore softly. Poirot scraped the crust with a fingernail. It flaked away, dreed blood, but not human. Animal. Curious, he murmured. A rehearsal, perhaps. Downstairs, the atrium had become a tribunal. Dr. Voss paced before the fire, medical bag clutched like a talisman. Klaus Ritter nursed brandy, eyes bloodshot. Madame Duval sat apart, veils drawn, murmuring to her crystal ball. Hans hovered at the foot of the stairs, twisting his porter's cap. Poirot descended like a judge. We shall examine the second rose, the one from the terrace. Favre produced it from the safe, still wrapped in gauze. Poirot laid both blooms side by side on the concierge's desk. The first, from Stahl's hand, was perfect, stem thornless, a single bead of dew at its heart. The second, from Beatrice's door, showed a bruise at the base of one petal frostbite. Poirot produced his lens. Observe, the cells here have burst. This rose was frozen, then thawed rapidly. Ritter snorted. Greenhouse roses, they keep them in the icehouse for freshness. Précisément, Poirot said. But the icehouse is locked, key held by Lucien, and Lucien was in the kitchen from midnight until dawn. He turned to Hans. The boy shrank back. Poirot knelt, eye level, and spoke in gentle French. Tu as vu quelque chose, n'est-ce pas? Hans hesitated, then nodded. He mimed pulling a rope. The dumbwaiter, Favre translated. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Show me. They processed to the service corridor, a narrow throat of brick and shadow. The dumbwaiter shaft yawned like a grave. Hans opened the hatch. Inside, a wooden box large enough for trays or a child. Poirot shone his pocket torch. The ropes were frayed but oiled recently. On the floor of the box, a smear of red, wax. He scraped it. Sealing wax from the concierge's desk. Favre. Lucien seals the mail at 11 p.m. sharp. Poirot climbed the service stairs to the floor above. The shaft continued upward past Beatrice's suite to the attic. The attic door was locked. Poirot produced a pick from his waistcoat click. Dust and moonlight. Crates of old linens, a dressmaker's dummy draped in cobwebs. In the corner, a child's sled painted with faded roses, and beneath it, a third rose, stem snapped, petals scattered like blood. Poirot gathered them. Our killer practices, but why roses? Why now? He descended to the library. The fire had burned low, but the grate held secrets. Poirot raked the ashes. Among the cinders, a shard of green glass. Absinthe bottle. Lady Beatrice's voice drifted from the doorway. I drank none. I loathe the stuff. Poirot held up the shard. Yet someone did, and they watched you read. He moved to the bookshelves. a gap between Balzac and Baudelaire the exact width of a human shoulder. Favre whispered, "A priest hole?" "Non, a watching place." Poirot pressed the panel. It swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a narrow passage. Dust undisturbed except for a single set of prints. Small, barefoot. The prints led to a grate overlooking the library fire. From here, one could see the entire room. Poirot's breath plumed white. The passage was colder than the corridor. He followed the prints to a junction. One set continued to the attic. The other descended toward the ice house. Back in the atrium, Poirot faced the suspects. The killer is among us, and they are small, agile, familiar with the hotel's veins. Madame Duval laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "A ghost child? How delicious!" Poirot's gaze fixed on Hans. The boy's hands trembled. "Non, madame, not a ghost, a witness." He turned to Favre. "Lock the doors. No one leaves this room." But as the clock struck 1, the lights flickered. Chapter 3. The Seance of Smoke and Lies. The emergency lamps bled crimson across the atrium, turning faces into masks of tragedy. The frozen rose sat on the concierge's desk like an accusation encased in glass. Poirot lifted the block with both hands, heavy, denser than water ice. He tilted it toward the light. The bloom inside was suspended mid-bloom. Petals flared in eternal crimson, stems snapped at a precise angle. Favre's voice cracked. "Dry ice. Has to be. Sublimes at -78. Poirot set the block down with reverence. Yet the etching asked Solange about the seance was done after freezing. Observe the frost feathers. They radiate from the letters, not across them. He produced his lens. The grooves were melted, then refrozen down with a heated stylus. Madame Solange Duval rose from her chair, veils rustling like raven wings. The spirits speak through ice as readily as Ouija. You waste time on parlor tricks, monsieur. Poirot's smile was thin. Then let us attend the parlor, madame. The séance is overdue. They processed to the Louis XV salon walls paneled in gilt and faded silk, a round table draped in black velvet, crystal ball already fogged, though untouched. Candles guttered in silver sconces, the storm outside pressed against the windows like a living beast. Poirot took the remaining chair, monocle flashing. We shall dispense with theatrics, madame. You will contact the spirit of Victor Stahl, exactly as planned. Duval's eyes narrowed, but she nodded. The candles were snuffed save one. Darkness pooled. She placed her hands on the crystal. Spirits of the veil, we call Victor Stahl. Speak. Silence. Wind moaned in the chimney, then tap. The crystal ball vibrated. A second tap, louder. Ritter snorted. Table rapping, child's play. Poirot's gaze flicked to Hans. The boy's hands were still. Duval intoned, Victor, who took your life? The candle flame stretched tall, blue at its heart. A rose materialized on the black cloth thawed, dripping, petals unfurling as if kissed by summer. Favre lunged backward, chair scraping. A port! Poirot pinched the stem between gloved fingers. Warm, human warmth. A bead of moisture rolled down his wrist blood. He lifted the bloom. Beneath it, a scrap of black veil torn. Duval's hand flew to her throat. The tear matched exactly. Madame, Poirot said softly, your spirits are accomplices with nimble fingers. The rose was passed through the dumbwaiter shaft behind the paneling. He stood, crossed to the wainscot and pressed. A panel swung inward, revealing the shaft. Inside, a child's handprint in red wax. Duval laughed, throaty. A parlor trick, as the German says, prove malice. Poirot's eyes gleamed. I shall. But first, the motive. He turned to the assembly. Madame Duval was invited to contact Anna Stahl, Victor's late wife, lost to an avalanche in 1929. But Anna left a codiciller jewelry to charity unless Victor remarried within 10 years. He announced his engagement to Lady Beatrice 6 weeks ago. The deadline passed last month. Beatrice gasped. The jewels are worth a fortune. Precisely, Poirot said. Madame Duval had swindled Anna's mother of a similar estate in Paris. Exposure would ruin her, but a séance of final performance might persuade Victor to honor the codicil posthumously. Voss interrupted, voice trembling. Victor laughed at her. Said he'd expose her tomorrow. Duval's composure cracked. Lies! Poirot produced the frozen rose from the atrium. This ice is not dry, it is distilled water, frozen in a spherical mold. Observe the curvature. Such molds are used in the kitchen for sorbet bombs. The etching stylus? A branding iron from the wine cellar, heated in the same fire that bent Lady Beatrice's poker. He turned to Hans. You saw the branding, Non? The boy nodded, mimed holding a hot iron. Chapter 4. The Man Who Froze Alive. The icehouse door groaned open on hinges, stiff with rime. A breath of air colder than the storm outside rolled over them, carrying the scent of iron and venison. Poirot stepped across the threshold first, pocket torch cutting a narrow cone through the dark. The beam glinted off hanging carcasses, pheasant, hare, a stag quartered like a cathedral statue, each draped in frost that sparkled like mica. Inspector Favre followed, lantern raised. Hans lingered on the sill, eyes wide, breath pluming in frantic puffs. The temperature gauge on the wall read 28 degrees C. Poirot's cane tapped the sawdust floor. The kitchen uses this chamber for champagne and game. Yet the lock was forced from within. He indicated fresh gouges around the hasp claw marks, 3 parallel scratches, identical to those on the terrace balustrade. Favre shivered. The second body Ritter was found in his suite. How does this connect? Poirot did not answer at once. He moved between the carcasses, parting them like curtains. At the rear wall, a wooden crate had been dragged aside. Behind it, a child-sized tunnel burrowed into the stone, edges smoothed by generations of small hands. He knelt. The tunnel exhaled a draft even colder than the chamber. Inside, the torch revealed a nest, moth-eaten blankets, a child's slate with chalk roses, and Poirot's breath caught a gas mask. Tout en dessous surplus, rubber cracked but intact. Favre whistled. That's military, filters carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and liquid aerosols, Poirot finished. He lifted the mask. The eye lenses were smeared with rose attar. Hans made a choking sound and pointed upward. High on the wall, a ventilation grate hung askew. Beyond it, the shaft that serviced the suites above. Poirot stood. Our killer is petite, uses the hotel's arteries, but Ritter? He led them back through the corridors, boots crunching on frost that had crept indoors like ivy. Suite 7 Ritter's stood ajar. The door's lock was intact, yet the key lay on the carpet inside, as if the occupant had opened it himself. The room was a tableau of interrupted motion. Klaus Ritter stood frozen mid-stride, 1 foot forward, right hand outstretched toward the wall safe. His face was contorted in a rictus of surprise, mouth open, eyes bulging, skin translucent, veins cobalt beneath. A single red rose lay at his feet, petals scattered like drops of blood. Poirot circled the corpse. He was walking when the cold took him. Observe no collapse, no slump. The temperature here is -10. Favre checked the thermostat set to 22, yet the needle quivered at sub-zero. Poirot knelt by the safe, open, papers strewn, blueprints stamped Curio Stahl patent, sole proprietor V. Stahl. A fountain pen lay uncapped, ink frozen into a black icicle. He lifted Ritter's pocket, watch stopped at 2:47 a.m. The crystal cracked in a perfect circle as if struck by a pellet. Favre muttered, "Same minute as the terrace rose." Poirot's gaze swept the room. The window was sealed, frost feathers inside the glass. On the carpet, a faint circular stain, oily. He touched its silicone. From the gas mask seal, he said. The killer wore it, entered through. He moved to the wardrobe. Behind the suits, a panel swung inward, the ventilation shaft, wide enough for a child. Hans mimed, breathing through a scarf. Poirot nodded. The killer released a gas heavier than air. Ritter opened the safe, turned and walked into the cloud. He reconstructed aloud. Liquid CO2, aerosolized through the mask's exhale valve, the canister here. Under the bed, a brass fire extinguisher refitted with a nozzle, empty. Fav. But CO2 doesn't freeze flesh like this. No, it asphyxiates. The preservation is post-mortem. Poirot indicated Ritter's shoes dry. He was posed after death, the rose placed, then the room chilled via the vent. He shone the torch into the shaft. A child's bare footprints in frost led upward toward the attic. Back in the corridor, Poirot paused at the thermostat panel. Someone had rewired it, copper filaments soldered to the hotel's main line, bypassing controls. The killer is ingenious, he said, uses the hotel's own systems as weapons. They descended to the kitchen. The dry ice chamber, a steel cabinet for sorbets, stood open. Inside, a child's handprint in sublimed frost, and on the floor a mold spherical used for ice bombs. Poirot lifted it. The frozen roses, cast here, etched with a heated iron. The chef, roused from sleep, swore he'd locked the chamber at midnight. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Then our killer has keys, or makes them. He returned to the atrium. The suspects had gathered again, faces gaunt in the emergency lamps. Poirot addressed them. Monsieur Ritter died at 2:47 a.m., the witching minute, the same as Stahl. The killer times their tableau to a private clock. Lady Beatrice whispered, Victor's wife Anadide at 2:47. The avalanche report. He kept the telegram. Poirot's little gray cells word. Then the roses are love letters from the grave. He turned to Hans. You saw the killer leave the ice house, no? The boy nodded, mimed, crawling. Poirot knelt. Show me where. Hans led them to the dumbwaiter in the service corridor. The shaft descended to the wine cellar. Poirot opened the hatch. Inside, a child's bare foot severed at the ankle, preserved in a jar of formaldehyde. Favre recoiled. Poirot lifted the jar. The foot was waxicast, but the toenails were real, painted rose. A macabre doll, he murmured. The killer practices anatomy. He unscrewed the lid. Inside, beneath the foot, a key, brass-tagged Master, Sanatorium, 1894. Favre. The hotel's original keys lost decades ago. Poirot pocketed it. Then the past is not buried, it walks. As they climbed the stairs, the hotel groaned, a deep, subaudible thud. Favre paled. Avalanche warning. The ridge above. Poirot's voice cut through. We have until dawn. The killer's stage is set, but the curtain falls on them. On the landing, the temperature plummeted again. Frost raced across the wallpaper like veins. From the attic above, a child's voice sang faint and clear. Roses are red, ice is blue. Victor forgot, and so will you. The dumbwaiter rope twitched. Poirot looked up. The child in the walls has a name, and a mother. He started upward, cane tapping a steady rhythm. Chapter 5. The Avalanche Warning. The hotel had begun to breathe. Corridors exhaled frost. Chandeliers dripped like thawing stalactites. Every footstep rang too loud, as if the building itself listened. Poirot led the procession upward, Favre with lantern, Hans clutching a ring of keys that clinked like bones, Lady Beatrice wrapped in sable, Dr. Voss clutching his bag, Ritter's absence a cold space at their heels. Madame Duval had been locked in the manager's office under guard. Her screams still echoed faintly through the pipes. They reached the attic door. The sanatorium master key slid home with a soft snick. Poirot paused. Inside we meet the past. Prepare yourselves. He pushed. Moonlight speared through a cracked skylight, silvering dust that hung in the air like ash. The attic stretched the length of the hotel beams, black with age. Crates labeled in faded German Kinderstation 1894, Children's Ward. In the center, a circle of roses, fresh, arranged on the plank floor. 12 blooms, one for each hour. At the heart of the circle lay the wax foot from the dumbwaiter, now joined by a wax hand, fingers curled around a silver locket. Poirot knelt. The locket was warm. He opened it. Inside, a miniature portrait of Anna Stahl on her wedding day, veil of Brussels lace, eyes luminous. On the reverse engraved, "To my darling V, 247 forever." Favre whispered, "The avalanche minute." Poirot's torch swept the shadows. Children's cots lined the walls, iron frames twisted into grotesque shapes by decades of frost heave. On one cot, a child's nightgown, yellowed, embroidered with tiny roses. Hans made a strangled sound and pointed to the far gable. A panel stood ajar, painted to match the wall, but the paint had blistered. Poirot crossed the circle, careful not to disturb the roses. The panel opened onto a narrow staircase spiraling downward inside the walls. He descended. The stair was a throat of brick and ice. Each step groaned. Halfway down, the air grew warmer, unnaturally so. At the bottom, a nursery. Walls papered in faded nursery rhyme scenes. Little Bo Peep, but the sheep had human eyes. A rocking horse, mane of real hair, rocked though no wind stirred. In the corner, a child's height chart carved into the plaster. Marks from 80 centimeters to 120 centimeters, each dated in a childish scrawl. The last, Greta, 12 years, 1935. Poirot's breath plumed white despite the warmth. A coal stove glowed in the grate, recently fed. On a small table, a child's tea set, porcelain cups filled with frozen blood hair from the kitchen. Beside it, a notebook, leather-bound, pages swollen with damp. Poirot opened it. The first entry in a child's rounded hand. Mama said Papa would come when the roses bloomed, but roses don't bloom in snow, so I make them. Later pages detailed experiments. Dry ice burns skin, liquid CO2 better, freezes breath into snow. Sketches, the hotel's ventilation system annotated in red ink. A diagram of the dumbwaiter with pulleys marked for roses. Poirot closed the book. Greta, the child in the walls. Favre's lantern trembled. But how? A soft click. The nursery door behind them swung shut. The stove flared, then died. Darkness. Poirot's torch found the door. Locked. From the outside. He rapped with his cane. No answer. Hans pounded, frantic. Poirot turned back to the room. The rocking horse had stopped facing them. On the height chart, fresh chalk. You let her freeze. The temperature plummeted. Frost raced across the floorboards, crackling like gunfire. Lady Beatrice screamed. Poirot's torch beam caught movement, a child, pale as moonlight, standing in the corner where no corner had been. Barefoot, in a sanatorium gown, hair white blonde, eyes milk-blind with albinism. She held a spray canister brass, repurposed fire extinguisher. Greta, Poirot said gently, we are not your enemies. The child's voice was unused, rusty. You let Mama freeze. At 2:47, I remember. She raised the canister. Hiss, a cloud of white billowed CO2 snow. Poirot lunged, shielding Beatrice. The gas was bitter, lung-searing. He felt his fingers numb. Favre smashed the door with his shoulder, crackwood splintered. They stumbled into the corridor. The nursery door slammed behind them. Poirot coughed, eyes streaming. She is real. Flesh, not ghost. But the hotel is her weapon. He led them upward again to the attic. The circle of roses had been disturbed, one bloom missing. In its place, the wax hand now thawing, fingers uncurling to reveal a key. Poirot lifted it. Tagged. Cryogenics vault. Basement. Favre. There's no basement vault. The plans. Sanatorium plans. Poirot corrected. Before the hotel, tuberculosis patients were stored in cold chambers between treatments. The vault is below the ice house. They descended through service corridors now slick with meltwater. The hotel wept. The ice house again. Poirot moved the crate aside, revealing a trapdoor in the floor iron padlocked. The new key fit. Below, a spiral stair of stone dripping. The vault was a crypt. Rows of steel drawers lined the wall's morgue drawers, each labeled with a child's name and date. Chapter 6. The hand that reached the staircase to the roof was a chimney of ice and panic. Snow poured through the shattered skylight above, a white waterfall that hissed against the hot stovepipes. Poirot carried Greta piggyback. Her bare feet blew, her breath a fragile cloud against his neck. The child weighed less than his winter coat. Favre led with the lantern, one hand clamped on Lady Beatrice's wrist. Dr. Voss stumbled behind, medical bag lost somewhere in the vault. Hans brought up the rear, keys jangling like a death knell. Each step upward was a negotiation with gravity. The hotel shifted beneath them, beams groaning, plaster snowing from the ceiling. A chandelier crashed 3 floors below, crystal exploding like gunfire. Poirot's mind raced faster than his feet. The avalanche is the final act. Greta planned it, or the mountain did. Either way, the curtain falls. They burst through the service hatch onto the roof. The storm hit like a living wall, wind at 90 kilometers an hour, snow horizontal, visibility 0. The ridge above the hotel glowed with a ghostly luminescence, the snowpack pregnant with collapse. The funicular station, a glass box on stilts, stood 50 meters away, cables swaying like harp strings. The car itself dangled halfway down the cliff, frozen solid. Favre shouted over the gale, "Cables are iced. We'll never—" Poirot set Greta down. "Non. We use the hotel." He scanned the roof. The central chimney, wide as a church steeple, belched steam from the boilers below. Around it, a lattice of guy wires anchored to the eaves, humming in the wind. Poirot seized a coil of laundry rope from the drying rack. "Hans, your belt." The boy obeyed. Poirot knotted belt to rope, then to a guy wire. "A zip line, one at a time. The station roof will hold." Lady Beatrice blanched. "We'll be shot off the edge." "Better the edge than the avalanche," Poirot snapped. He looped the rope around Greta's waist, then his own. "You first, petite. Hold tight." Greta's milk-blind eyes fixed on him. "Will Mama be there?" Poirot's heart twisted. "She will be proud." He pushed. The child shot down the wire, a pale comet against the black sky. Hans caught her at the station, arms shaking. Next, Beatrice. Then Voss, sobbing, useless. Favre went forth, lantern extinguished by the wind. Poirot last. He looped the rope, kicked off. The avalanche hit, a roar like God clearing his throat. The ridge exploded outward, a white tidal wave cresting the roof. Snow slammed into Poirot mid-air, spinning him like a leaf. The wire sang, then snapped. He fell. Darkness. Then, impact. Not the abyss. The glass roof of the funicular station. It shattered beneath him, but the frame held. He crashed through into the ticket booth, snow pouring in after. Hands dragged him upright. Favre, Beatrice, Hans. Greta clung to his leg, face buried in his coat. The station trembled. Cables groaned. The car below swayed, ice cracking. Poirot coughed blood-flecked snow. "The car, it is our ark, but the winch," Hans pointed. The winch house, a shed the size of a confessional, stood intact. Inside, the manual crank, frozen solid. Voss babbled, "We'll never—" Poirot seized a fire axe from the wall. Together. They cranked. Iron screamed. The car lurched upward, inch by inch. Snow piled against the windows, turning the world white. Halfway up, the cable snapped on the hotel side. The car dropped 10 meters, then jerked to a halt, dangling by the lower anchor. Silence. They were suspended over the void, the glacier a pale mouth below. Greta whispered, "We're flying." Poirot's mind whirred. The lower anchor, rated for 2 tons. "We are 6, but the car has brakes." He found the brake lever, rusted but intact. "When I say pull." He counted heartbeats. The car swayed, wind rocking it like a cradle. "Now!" They hauled. The brake released. The car slid, controlled down the remaining cable, gathering speed. The glacier rushed up. At the last second, Poirot yanked the emergency brake. Sparks flew. The car screeched, stopped 1 meter above the ice. The door burst open. They spilled onto the glacier, alive. Dawn bled across the sky, rose and gold. The hotel was gone, buried under a mountain of white. Only the funicular tower protruded, a broken finger. Rescue helicopters thumped in the distance, rotors chopping the silence. Poirot sat in the snow, Greta in his lap. She was shivering, but her eyes clear for the first time. He spoke softly. "Your mother did not die in the avalanche, Greta. She lived in Paris with a new name. I will find her." The child looked at the buried hotel. "The roses, they were for her." "Oui, and now they sleep." Favre approached, blanket-wrapped. "The bodies, Stahl, Ritter, they'll be under 50 meters of snow." Poirot shook his head. "No, Greta preserved them perfectly. When the spring thaw comes, the mountain will deliver its secrets." He opened his hand. In it, the locket, cracked but intact. Anna's portrait smiled out serene. Greta touched it. "She's pretty." "Like you," Poirot said. Hans signed rapidly. Favre translated, voice hoarse. "He says the hotel knew. The walls remembered every child who died in the sanatorium. Greta was the last." Poirot stood, legs trembling. "Then the frozen secret is closed. Order is restored." But as the helicopters descended, Greta tugged his sleeve. "Monsieur, the ice does remember. Look." She pointed to the glacier. In the fresh snow, a perfect rose, formed by wind and chance, petals of frost. Poirot smiled, weary but triumphant. "Oui, petite. But memory is not the same as vengeance." He lifted her into the first helicopter. The rotors drowned the wind. As they rose, the glacier glittered below, white, endless, silent. The hotel was a mound, indistinguishable from the mountain. Chapter 7. The Child in the Walls. The nursery door had not merely shut, it had vanished. Where the painted panel had been, only blank plaster remained, seamless, as if the wall had swallowed its own mouth. Poirot ran his gloved fingers across the surface, smooth, cold, new. The height chart, the rocking horse, the child's tea set, all gone. The air itself felt compressed, as though the room beyond had been erased by a giant eraser. Favre pounded the wall with the butt of his lantern. "Mon Dieu, it's solid." Lady Beatrice pressed her ear to the plaster. "I hear breathing." Poirot's torch beam danced across the corridor. Frost feathered the wallpaper in frantic spirals, forming roses, petals, thorns, stems, then melting as quickly as they appeared. The temperature gauge on the wall, which had read 10 degrees moments ago, now spun wildly, needle clacking like a typewriter. Hans dropped to his knees, signing frantically. Favre translated, voice trembling. "He says the hotel changes. When the children were sick, the walls moved to hide them from the doctors. Greta knows the trick." Poirot's little gray cells whirred. A false wall, counterweighted, triggered from within. He knelt, tracing the baseboard. A hairline crack no wider than a fingernail. He inserted his cane. Click. The plaster sighed. A section swung inward on silent hinges, revealing the nursery intact. The stove still glowed, but the coal had turned to rubies, each ember a perfect rosebud. The rocking horse faced them, eyes now real glass, reflecting their terrified faces. Greta stood in the center, barefoot on the frozen blood in the teacups. She held the spray canister like a scepter, her milk-blind eyes fixed on Dr. Voss. "Papa," she said, the word a shard of ice. "You left me in the drawer." Voss collapsed to his knees. "Greta, my God, you were sick. The light, it burned you." "You burned me," she corrected. "Mama said you'd come when the roses bloomed, but roses don't bloom in drawers." Poirot stepped forward, hands open. "Greta, the drawer was a cradle, not a coffin. Your father sent money." "Money," she spat, "for the sanatorium, not for me." She raised the canister. Hiss, a warning puff of CO2 snow. "Victor kept Mama's hand in ice, I kept his, fair." Lady Beatrice whispered, "The hand in the vault." "Wax," Greta said, "like the dolls they gave us to practice on. I made better ones." She gestured to the walls. Poirot followed her gaze. The nursery rhyme scenes had changed. Little Bo Peep now held a rose instead of a crook. The sheep had human faces, Stahl, Ritter, Duval. Their eyes followed him. He moved to the height chart. The final mark, Greta, 12 yours, 1935, had been scratched out. Beneath, in fresh chalk, Greta, forever 247. Favre's lantern flickered. "We're trapped. The avalanche," Greta smiled, a terrible child's smile. "The mountain remembers too. It kept Mama's scream. I just helped it." Poirot's mind raced. The avalanche was no accident. She loosened the snowpack. How? He noticed the stovepipe, bent, rerouted into the wall. A blower. He followed the pipe with his torch. It led to a vent in the ceiling, connected to the roof ridge. "Mon Dieu," he breathed. "You used the boiler steam to melt the snowpack from within. A hot knife through butter." Greta clapped, delighted. "Science! Dr. Voss taught me before he forgot." Voss sobbed. "I searched for you after the hotel converted the records." "Burned," Greta finished. "I burned them. With the roses." Poirot edged closer. "The roses, where do they come from?" Greta pointed to the rocking horse. Its mane was real hair, blonde like hers. She lifted the saddle. Beneath, a hothouse bulb wired to the stove. Soil packed with rose cuttings, roots glowing red from the heat. "I grew them in the walls," she said proudly. "Between the children's bones." Hans made a choking sound. He signed, "The bones sing at night." Poirot's torch found the corner, a pile of small bones arranged in a perfect rows, each rib painted crimson. Lady Beatrice retched. Greta's voice softened. "They were my friends. They taught me the hotel's secrets, the dumbwaiter, the vents, the cryogenics vault where they kept the ones who wouldn't." "Wake." Poirot's cane tapped the floorboards. "Hollow." He pried one up. Beneath, a ledger, sanatorium issue, pages brittle, entries in a nurse's hand, patient GV, albino, light-sensitive, father Dr. A. Voss, mother A. Stahl, deceased, monthly stipend received, do not expose to sun. The final entry, patient escaped drawer, search unsuccessful, presumed deceased. Poirot closed the ledger. "You were never deceased, Greta, only forgotten." Greta's eyes filled. "Mama came back, once. In 1929, she brought a rose, said Papa would fetch me when it bloomed again. It never did." She raised the canister higher. Hiss, the cloud billowed thicker now. The temperature plummeted to 20 degrees Celsius in seconds. Frost crackled across the walls, sealing the door behind them. Favre shouted, "We'll freeze!" Poirot's breath plumed white. "No, she wants us to watch." He noticed the tea set. The frozen blood in the cups had thawed, forming perfect roses of crimson liquid. Greta whispered, "The ice remembers. At 2:47 it will take you all. Like it took Mama." The stove flared, blue flame unnatural. The temperature rose as quickly as it had fallen. The frost retreated, revealing the walls moving, panels sliding, the nursery expanding. Poirot's eyes widened. The hotel is alive, counterweights in the attic. She's hurting us. The rocking horse began to rock, faster, faster. Its glass eyes glowed. Greta backed toward a new panel that had opened behind her. The roof, the avalanche. You'll see Mama's face in the snow. She slipped through. The panel sealed. The stove exploded. Flames licked the walls, but the frost fought back, hissing into steam. The nursery became a sauna of ice and fire. Poirot seized the ledger, stuffed it in his coat. To the attic! The counterweights! She controls them from there! They ran. The corridor outside had changed. The wallpaper now depicted the avalanche. White waves, a woman's face screaming in the snow. Anna Stahl. Favre's lantern died. Darkness, then light. The emergency lamps glowed red, pulsing like a heartbeat. Hans led them, signing, "This way, the children's path." They crawled through a child-sized tunnel, knees scraping bones. The air smelled of roses and formaldehyde. They emerged in the attic, transformed. The circle of roses was now a spiral, leading to the skylight. Each bloom throbbed, veins of frost pulsing like arteries. Greta stood beneath the skylight, arms raised. Snow poured through the cracked glass, forming a column around her. The attic floor tilted. Counterweights groaned. The entire hotel shifted on its foundations. Poirot shouted, "The ridge! She's triggering the avalanche from here!" He lunged for the skylight. Greta turned, canister empty, but her eyes ancient. "You can't stop the mountain," she said. Poirot smiled, fierce. "No, but I can stop you." He seized a guy wire, looped it around her waist. "Downstairs, now." The attic lurched. The avalanche roared closer. Greta struggled, but Poirot held firm. "Your mother is alive, Greta, in Paris. I will take you to her." The child went still. "Mama?" The skylight shattered. Snow poured in. Poirot carried her toward the hatch. "Oui, but first, we live." Chapter 8. Trapped with the Ghost. The attic had become a maelstrom. Snow screamed through the shattered skylight in horizontal sheets, driven by a wind that howled like a dying god. The floor tilted at a sickening angle. Counterweights in the eaves groaned, iron cables snapping like harp strings. Crates of sanatorium linen slid past Poirot's boots, crashing through the balustrade into the void below. Greta clung to his neck, her small body rigid with terror. The guy wire around her waist had cut a red line into her gown, but she did not cry. Her milk-blind eyes stared past him, fixed on the column of snow where the skylight had been. "Mama's face," she whispered, "in the snow." Poirot's torch was gone, lost in the nursery blast. Emergency lamps pulsed crimson, strobing the attic into a nightmare theater. The spiral of roses had ignited, each bloom a torch of blue flame that did not consume the petals. The air reeked of a tar and burning sugar. Favre's voice cracked through the gale. "The hatch, locked from below." Poirot spun. The service hatch, their only exit, had been barred with a child's cot, iron frame twisted into a barricade. Hans clawed at it, fingers bleeding. Lady Beatrice screamed as a beam crashed beside her, sparks showering her sable coat. Dr. Voss lay crumpled near the spiral's heart, unconscious. A gash across his temple leaking red onto the frost. Poirot's mind raced, gray cells firing like pistons. Greta triggered the counterweights from here. A lever. Where? He followed the snapping cables upward. They converged at a winch bolted to the central beam. Sanatorium vintage, rusted but intact. A child's hand could reach the release. Greta's hand. He set her down. "Petite, you opened the mountain. Now close it." She shook her head, blonde hair whipping. "The roses must bloom at 2:47 forever." Poirot seized her shoulders. "Listen." The avalanche will bury the hotel, the roses. You, is that what Mama wants? For the first time, doubt flickered across her face. The blue flames reflected in her eyes like frozen stars. From the winch, a child's voice, tinny, recorded. Anna Stahl. Greta, my love, come to the light. Greta froze. Mama? Poirot's gaze darted, the gramophone hidden in the winch housing. He lunged, yanked the needle. Silence. A trick, he said gently. Your mother is alive, in Paris. I have her address. He produced the ledger from his coat, pages torn but the final entry intact. A. Duval, Rue de la Paix. Greta stared at the name. Duval? Solange is your aunt, Poirot said. She sold the secret of your birth to Victor for jewels. The yo-yo attic lurched. A cable snapped overhead, whipping like a scythe. It sliced the air inches from Beatrice's throat. Favre roared, We have minutes! Poirot crawled to the winch. The release lever was jammed, wedged with a child's shoe, leather cracked, sole painted with a rose. Greta's shoe. He pried it free. The lever moved. Counterweights groaned, the floor righting itself by degrees. But the avalanche was committed. The ridge above detonated. K-boom! A white wall cresting the roofline, devouring the sky. Poirot's eyes swept the attic. The guy wires, still intact on the east side. He seized one, tested it. It sang, taut. To the funicular station, he shouted. Zip line. He knotted the wire around Greta's waist, then his own. You first. She hesitated, then nodded. A child's trust, fragile as frost. He pushed her into the storm. The wire screamed. Greta shot across the void, a pale arrow against the white. Hans caught her on the station roof, arms shaking. Next, Beatrice, sobbing but brave. Then Voss, dragged by Favre. The inspector went last, lantern finally dead. Poirot last. He looped the wire, kicked off. The avalanche hit. Snow slammed into him midair, a frozen hammer. The wire held, but the station roof buckled. Glass exploded inward. Poirot crashed through, landing in a heap of shards and bodies. The station swayed, cables icing over. The funicular car dangled below, a coffin on a string. Greta's voice, small. The winch house. The shed, intact. Inside, the manual crank, frozen but turnable. They cranked. Iron screamed. The car lurched upward inch by tortured inch. Snow piled against the windows, turning the world to milk. Halfway, the upper cable snapped. The car dropped 10 meters, then jerked, dangling by the lower anchor. Silence. They hung over the glacier, the hotel's grave. Poirot found the brake lever. Together, they pulled. The car slid, controlled, down the remaining cable. The glacier rushed up. At the last second, Poirot yanked the emergency brake. Sparks. The car stopped 1 meter above the ice. The door burst open. They spilled onto the glacier, alive. Dawn bled rose and gold. The hotel was a mound indistinguishable from the mountain. Only the funicular tower protruded, a broken finger. Helicopters thumped in the distance. Chapter 9. The Logic of Ice. The glacier exhaled. Cold vapor rose from the fresh scar where the avalanche had gouged the mountain, carrying with it the faint perfume of crushed roses, a tar of Damascus, preserved for decades in the hotel's hothouse walls. Poirot stood on the funicular platform's twisted remnants, coat shredded, mustaches rimed with frost. The survivors huddled in a knot, Favre barking coordinates into a rescue flare, Lady Beatrice clutching Voss like a broken doll. Hans signing prayers to the sky. Greta sat apart on a slab of blue ice, knees drawn to chin, the ledger open on her lap. Her milk-blind eyes reflected the dawn, pink, gold, merciless. Helicopters thumped closer, Swiss air rescue, red crosses stark against white. But Poirot's work was not done. The little gray cells demanded order. He gathered them in the snow's cruel amphitheater, voice carrying over the rotors. Mes amis, the storm ends, but the inquest begins, maintenance. He began with the corpse on the terrace, Victor Stahl, preserved at 34 de Grunelini. Cause asphyxiation by CO2 aerosol. The gas, heavier than air, pooled in the lungs, death instantaneous. Then, he gestured to Greta. The artist posed her canvas. Greta did not look up. He forgot Mama, I reminded him. Poirot continued. The rose in his hand, grown in the walls, chilled in the sorbet mold, etched with the branding iron. Delivered via dumbwaiter at 2:47 a.m., the minute of Anna's avalanche. A love letter. Favre nodded, notebook frozen open. And Ritter? Same method. Ritter, sleepless over the patent, opened his safe. Greta entered through the ventilation shaft, child-sized, remember. She wore the gas mask, exhaled the CO2 snow. He walked 3 steps into the cloud, posed mid-stride, the cracked watch, struck by a frozen pellet to stop the hands. Lady Beatrice whispered, "The roses at my door." Warnings. To the woman replacing Mama. The dagger, surgical steel from Voss's bag. The blood, hair, rehearsed on game. Voss moaned. My nitrogen. Red herring. You carried it for cryotherapy, oui. But Greta used dry ice and liquid CO2 from the kitchen. Your guilt was abandonment, not murder. Poirot turned to the buried hotel. The supernatural, clockwork hands, gramophone voices, moving walls. All sanatorium relics. Counterweights from the children's ward, triggered by ropes in the attic. The nursery expanded, panels on rails like stage flats. Greta finally spoke, voice small. The children showed me. Their bones whispered the secrets. Poirot knelt before her. Oui, petite. The sanatorium hid the dying from the living. Drawers in the vault were beds, not coffins. You escaped yours, lived in the walls, grew roses under bulbs stolen from the hothouse, learned science from Voss's old textbooks. Greta closed the ledger. I wanted Mama to see, at 2:47 every night. Poirot's voice softened. She will see, but not in ice. The first helicopter touched down, rotors whipping snow into roses of powder. Medics swarmed, blankets, thermoses, radios crackling in German. Poirot addressed the pilot. Zermatt Hospital, then Paris. The child travels with me. Greta stood, legs steady now. She walked to the avalanche mound, placed her palm against the snow. It was warm, geothermal, the mountain's secret vein. Mama's hand, she said, reaching. Poirot joined her. Beneath the surface, something glinted, crystal. A chandelier, perhaps. Or a frozen rose, eternal. The supernatural was a child's grief, weaponized by isolation and genius. Favre closed his notebook, and the hand that moved, clockwork, wound by a falling crate in the icehouse, a toy. Greta turned. Not a toy, a promise. Mama's hand would move when Papa came. It did. The medics lifted Voss onto a stretcher. He reached for Greta. Forgive me. She took his hand, warm. The ice forgives, slowly. Lady Beatrice approached Poirot. My fiancé, will they recover him? In spring, Poirot said. The mountain thaws its secrets one by one. Hans signed. The children are free. Greta boarded the helicopter, locket around her neck. She looked down at the glacier. The frost rose had melted entirely, leaving only a handprint, small, perfect. Poirot settled beside her. The helicopter lifted, tilting toward Zermatt. Below, the avalanche field glittered, white, vast, silent. But in the snow's surface, wind etched new patterns, roses, dozens blooming in the slipstream. Greta pressed her face to the window. They're waving goodbye. Poirot adjusted his shattered monocle. Non, petite. They are blooming hello to a world with sun. The helicopter banked south toward Paris, toward Anna. Greta slept, thumb in mouth, the ledger her pillow. Poirot murmured to the dawn, "Le secret gelé et décongelé." Order restored, method triumphant. But as the glacier fell away, the snow shifted once more. A final rose formed, black petals, thorned stem. It pointed north toward the buried hotel. The ice did remember, and some secrets refreeze. Chapter 10. The Thaw. The rotors had become a lullaby. Greta slept against Poirot's shoulder, her breath a soft cloud on the helicopter's window. Below, the glacier slid past like a frozen river, its crevasses black smiles in the dawn. Zermatt's lights flickered ahead, warm, human, impossibly distant from the white grave they had escaped. Poirot's coat was shredded, his gloves lost, but the little gray cells burned hotter than any stove. He opened the sanatorium ledger one last time, pages stiff with meltwater. The final entry, A. Duval, Rue de la Paix, glowed like a beacon. Anna lived. The thaw was not merely of snow, but of a decade's lie. Favre sat opposite, notebook closed, face etched with exhaustion. Paris will want statements, the bodies. We'll wait, Poirot said. Spring will deliver Stahl and Ritter, preserved as perfectly as Greta intended. The canton will call it act of God. We know better. Lady Beatrice, wrapped in a medic's blanket, stared at the mound that had been the Grand Hôtel des Glaces. My ring. Victor's emerald, it's buried with him. Non, Poirot corrected gently, it is with her. He nodded to Greta. She took it from the vault, a dowry for Mama. Hans signed from the jump seat. The co-pilot translated, "The children's bones, they sing no more." Greta stirred. "They're happy," she murmured, eyes still closed. The roses bloomed. The helicopter banked over Zermatt's rooftops. The hospital landing pad was a square of light in the snow. Medics waited with stretchers, but Poirot waved them off. He carried Greta down himself, her weight a feather, her trust a stone. Inside, the corridors smelled of antiseptic and pine. A nurse tried to take the child. Greta clung to Poirot's neck. "Monsieur stays." He stayed. They placed her in a room with windows facing the Matterhorn. Sunlight filtered through blinds, gentle on her albino skin. A pediatrician examined her, malnourished, frost-nipped toes, but alive. Miraculously so. Poirot sat by the bed, ledger on his knee. "Maintenant, petite, we find Mama." He telephoned Paris, collect, urgent. The operator connected him to the prefecture. A dossier on Anna Duval, née Stahl, divorced, remarried, owner of a modest parfumerie on Rue de la Paix, no children listed. Poirot's mustaches bristled. "Bien, we go. But first, Voss." The doctor lay in the next room, sedated, wrist bandaged where Greta's wire had cut. Poirot entered quietly. Voss's eyes fluttered open. "Is she safe? But you will answer for abandonment. The courts are kinder to confession than to silence." Voss wept. "I sent money, every month. The sanatorium said she died. They lied, to keep the stipend. Greta lived in the walls, grew roses in the dark. Your science became her weapon." Poirot left him to the nurses. Back in Greta's room, the child was awake, staring at the Matterhorn. "It's big," she said. "Bigger than the hotel. Oui. Mountains forgive, people less so." A knock. Favre entered with a telegram. "Paris confirms. Anna Duval en route. Train arrives 14s." Poirot checked his pocket watch. Cracked but ticking. 11:47. Time. He dressed Greta in borrowed clothes. Too large, but clean. A wool cap hid her white hair. She clutched the locket, Anna's portrait inside. The train station was a bustle of steam and fur coats. Poirot stood on the platform, Greta's hand in his. The Paris Express hissed in, brakes squealing. Doors opened. Passengers spilled out, skis, trunks, children with mittens, then her. Anna was older, hair streaked silver, but the eyes were Greta's, milk-blind with wonder. She wore a rose-pink coat, a single Damascus bloom pinned to the lapel. Greta dropped Poirot's hand. "Mama!" Anna froze. The platform noise faded to a heartbeat. "Greta!" Her voice cracked like spring ice. The child ran. Anna knelt, arms open. They collided, mother and daughter, a decade's thaw in a single embrace. Poirot watched, monocle fogged, order restored, but the little gray cells itched. One thread remained. He approached Anna. "Madam, the rose on your coat, where?" She touched it, trembling. "A gift, from the hotel years ago. Victor said it would bring her back." Poirot's smile was thin. "No. Greta sent it from the walls." Anna wept into Greta's hair. "I thought you died. They told me. They lied, but the ice kept it secret." Favre joined them, hat in hand. "The canton closes the case. Force majeure. No charges for the child." Poirot nodded. "Bien. She is the victim, the mountain, the accomplice." They walked to the waiting car, Paris bound. Greta sat between Poirot and Anna, locket open on her lap. As Zermatt receded, Greta pressed her face to the window. "Look, monsieur, the mountain waves." Poirot followed her gaze. On the glacier, the avalanche field had settled. Wind had sculpted the snow into roses, hundreds, thousands, blooming white against blue. He closed his eyes. "Oui, petite. A garden for the forgiven." But in the locket, unnoticed, the portrait of Anna had changed. The eyes were no longer serene. They were watching. The ice remembered, and some roses bloomed black,